My name is Camille Weber. We're here with Don Byard, and this is the second half of the interview. So my first question for you, Don, is what organizations were you involved in during the wine industry, and how did you see that evolve, or how did your involvement evolve?
Early on, I was president of the Oregon Wine Growers Association. For 1 year. That's basically what we all did. We took our turn as president. And my biggest achievement there was trying to get the two organizations. There was one in the Willamette Valley, and then there was a strong one in the Southern Oregon too. Mm-hmm. So I felt that we should have a statewide organization. So I set that going, and the president the next year was able to achieve that and bring those two together into one total organization. And I didn't have a whole lot of time for a lot of meetings because of the way we were structured, with Carol and I both having jobs outside of the wine industry. Mm-hmm. And there were times during my career that I had to make that decision again and again, that I was not going to jump out of my profession into the wine industry full time. Mm-hmm. During the time in Salem, I was on the initial development of the Chemeketa program on that board. To kick that off and get that program going. Mm-hmm. And then I did start the wine growers meeting in Salem in 1978, which is still going today. And as far as I know, is the only educational meeting, regularly scheduled meeting going on in the state with wine growers. And it's still going, and I think it'll continue past my involvement. Mm-hmm. Over the years, because Carol and I did not jump in full time, we had a limited involvement in the industry for that reason, and the fact that we lived in Salem mm-hmm. and not the Portland or Dundee area. We haven't been as involved as much as lots of other people have. But I still play poker with some of the wine guys, still active in that area. Some of the old regime, mm-hmm. I am proud that I was able to, in exiting the wine industry, able to leave my vineyard in the hands of Brooks Winery, which is next door to my daughter's house, which we can see from here, who owns 5 acres of the original vineyard. Heather, name's Heather Kirk, and that allows me the ability to still be part of the industry and part of Brooks's future. And I can sit on her deck and smoke a cigar and have a glass of Rastaban Pinot Noir and watch the grapes grow and tell them how they should do things.
So, in your opinion, what makes a successful wine? Does it come down to the land, to the winemaking, or does marketing play a big role in that?
Marketing plays a huge role mm-hmm. in it. And let me get back to the original question, but let me expand on marketing. I think marketing is the point at which my wife Carolyn and I decided that we had to do something different, that we were spread too thin, that we had to unload something from our life. So we decided, based on our experience with the winery, we had great fun selling to retail. We enjoyed the winemaking process. We enjoyed everything except the part of marketing. Mm-hmm. And marketing was something that she did not want to take on, and I did not want to take on. And marketing to me takes a certain skill. And I would say, generally speaking, winemakers don't have that skill, and they don't want that skill. But I particularly did not enjoy marketing because you work all week on getting something done, and Monday morning it's the same thing again. Mm-hmm. Now, personally, I'm more of a project-oriented guy, mm-hmm. and I like to do creative things. I like to think about doing things differently. I've had experiences in my life. Working for the Port of Portland, I was able to do the first environmental statement in Oregon. Working for Department of Transportation, I was able to do the first state highway plan. I put together the environmental section in the state. I put together the scenic byway program for the state. I helped put together the federal program before that. So I've done lots of exciting things, and in the wine industry, I've helped put things together in different boards, but it demonstrates my interest in creating things and getting those going, but a lack of interest in managing them once they're completed and done. That to me is the boring part, and I like to move on to something new. So that prompted us to sell Hidden Springs Winery. Because of the marketing that needed to be done at that point in time, because other people were starting wineries and they were well funded, and they were able to bring people in to do the marketing, and that meant I had to do the marketing too. And personally, I did not have the time. Mm-hmm. But I could have hired people to do that, but that would have taken more wine to sell, right. More barrels, more storage, more equipment, and an investment that Carol and I weren't willing to make. So at that time, that was 1994, we sold the winery building to Gino Cuneo, who changed the name from Hidden Springs to Cuneo Cellars. And he carried on from there in that building. But the fortunate part was that the winery building was separate from the vineyard, so selling the winery became a thing that could be easily done and still keep the vineyard, mm-hmm. which was my first love. So from that point on, I became just the vineyard manager and selling grapes to Gino Cuneo first, and then later to Jimmy Brooks. Mm-hmm. And enjoyed that part of it, and it's something that I could do and still continue my career. If I had gone the other way, it's possible to say I'd still be working today. Whereas I've been retired for 15 years. So I think we made the better of the two decisions, and we're still married. Mm-hmm. That was a positive impact. You wanted to talk about wine, though.
Yeah, the success of the product itself.
Yeah.
So that's marketing, but what about, does it start in the land, or does the magic happen with the winemaker and manipulating?
I think the magic starts in the vineyard. That's my philosophy, that the vineyard development and the working together of the winemaker and the grower together to make that happen. That's an integral part of the situation, and a lot of it comes down to how you write your contract when you sell your grapes, and who does what, and it was always in my contracts that when I sold the grapes to a winery, that if they wanted to lessen the crop, like if I was going to produce 2 tons per acre, 2.5 tons per acre, and they wanted 1.5 tons per acre to increase the quality of the product, then they should be the ones to pay for that effort to do the thinning, so that they didn't come back and say, oh, it's too thick yet, we need to go back again. They made that judgment. And that takes a pretty good involvement between the winemaker and the grower, so that both are happy. And that has to happen, or else the results are not good, because the interests are different. And so I think that's an integral part of it. The other aspect, of course, is in the vineyard management side, is exposure to sun and pulling leaves, and what side do you pull the leaves from, and all of that has an influence on the quality of the wine.
And when you decide to pick and harvest.
When you decide to pick, and that should be the winemaker's decision when to pick, given availability of labor and given the availability of sunlight, and because in the past it has been cooler. We've had cooler years than in the past five years. It's been relatively easy when to pick. I mean, the last 2 years we've picked Pinot when it needed to be picked, not when the weather was changing. But we've had a lot of times when the weather was a determining factor when we picked. Storms were predicted to come in, and we had to get the grapes off before the storm came in.
Was there a year that really sticks out for you?
82, I think, was a cool year. And
yeah,
and that was a year. Yeah, years like that, we made a wine called Pacific Sunset, which is a blend of Pinot and Riesling. And then we make Pinot Noir Blanc, which was a white, almost a white wine out of a red grape. And that's what you do sometimes when you put an emphasis on those varieties or those products, when the full red wine that you really would like to produce, the great Pinot Noir, is not possible due to the grapes not being quite ripe enough. Or the rain comes in and gets you, and it dilutes the wine.
So, what is your favorite wine to make, and what is your favorite wine to drink?
I'm very fond of Riesling. And dry Riesling. But I also love Pinot Noir. And of course, I had never had Pinot Noir before I started this. This was my first real experience when we planted the grapes back in the old days and even tasting the grapes. It was my first experience with doing that. It was a wonderful experience, surprises, not knowing how sweet they really were, and how many seeds there were in.
Did you ever anticipate Pinot Noir becoming kind of the varietal known to Oregon? Oregon being known as this Pinot Noir producer, or?
Not when we planted. There was that hope in the background, but when we planted, we didn't know which variety was going to be our variety. I mean, it could have been Riesling, it could have been Chardonnay, it could have been Pinot Noir. I wasn't all that impressed with the Chardonnays that we planted. We had a clone. It was probably designed for California, and I personally never made a Chardonnay out of my grapes that I liked. And it was a hard sell because California had the market for Chardonnay wrapped up and with a lot of oak and a lot of alcohol and a different type of wine than we can grow here. We just can't produce that kind of Chardonnay.
Right.
So we tried to tout it as a food Chardonnay, but to go with food when California Chardonnays are a meal in themselves. But I never made one I really liked, and that was discouraging. So I pulled my Chardonnay out, and I planted Pinot Gris. So I have no Chardonnay. And now they have new clones for Chardonnay that are earlier ripeners. Maybe that will help. But I don't see Chardonnay as a grape that is going to make Oregon great. It's too much competition to the south. They do a great job down there with it. But Pinot Gris, on the other hand, is a really wonderful wine, and it has potential here that because it's one that can get in the winery and get in the bottle real quick and out on the market very quickly. The same as with Riesling, it doesn't require any oak, and it's as far as cash flow for the winery, it's a much better thing than Chardonnay, which requires very expensive barrels and longer time in the winery, longer time in inventory. So Pinot Gris, I think, is a much better grape for us, and it ripens easily.
Why do you think Pinot Noir is so popular then, as opposed to Pinot Gris and Riesling?
I think red wine in general is preferred. Personally, I like Pinot Noir. I like red wines, and I like red wines for different purposes. And on anything we can do to demonstrate that we're on an equal plane with Burgundy, and we can do that with Pinot Noir. We produce, this is the best place, in my opinion, in the United States to grow Pinot Noir, hands down. This is it. And it's not north of us, it's not west of us. And they can do it in California, but that they have so much heat down there that if they could turn the furnace down, they might be able to do it, but they produce them so quick. And they don't have the time on the vine that we do here. And generally speaking, across the worldwide wine scene, the best wines produced from each variety are produced at the most northerly latitude that you can ripen it. So
the grapes need to struggle a bit.
They need to struggle, they need time on the vine to mature.
So how does the heat affect the taste of the wine then? Particularly, like let's use the example of Pinot in California. So how does that heat affect the Pinot Noirs that they're making in California, and how does our cooler climate give us, I guess, a more unique or bolder Pinot?
Well, they get boldness down there.
Yeah.
But it's too high in alcohol. That's one of the big problems. And it has a kind of a burned flavor, pruny flavor that develops with overripe grapes. And if they pick them early, then it's a lifeless wine. It just doesn't. It's just not there. It's not mature. Whereas we get the balance is the important thing. We balance the alcohol, the flavors, the acidity. It goes through malolactic fermentation and allows the acids to flourish in that environment. The balance is the key.
So With the recent change in weather patterns, how have you seen that affecting Oregon wine? Or has it?
Well, it has. I'd say the last 2 years have been unbelievable. I don't know that that's a trend. I'm not totally a believer in climate change or global warming. I think it's cyclical and will come back to cooler times. But early on, we did have some real cool years and on the edge. And those are times when some of the vineyards that are on marginal sites will have a problem when we have a cool year. Everybody can ripen the last 2 years, and the last 2 years will be great wines, and even the cheaper products within each winery will have a higher standard than they have in the past. It just means that we can, for the first time, pick the grapes at the optimum time. Last 2 years. Before that, that hasn't always been the case. And on warmer sites, that's been more available. But in cooler sites, that hasn't been available. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So, what's your most memorable experience in the wine industry?
Wow.
I think you had a question.
Yeah, Carolyn mentioned that. I think my association with the people in the industry, and of course, association with people who consume your product has been a real important part of our relationship. We've had some wonderful people that we've met and enjoyed time with through the years, and it's even though we're competitors, we're still friends. And as we get older, we're more friendly because we have more time, you know, as some are retiring and turning the industry over to the younger kids, who, by the way, have a whole lot more energy than we do anymore. But I think that's been the most memorable association, and it continues, because every month I meet with the wine growers and the meeting, and we're all still good friends, and we see each other every month. And actually, in the beginning, when we were living in Portland and just moved here and working with the port, we formed a association, a wine tasting group. That was 1971. We started a group called Bacchus Caucus, and we'd meet once a month in people's homes. Each person would put on the program, and they were responsible for the educational experience. And we taste wine. 4 whites, 4 reds, have something to eat in between. That was a standard format, and that was 72 we started that, and we still get together with those people today. And it's not so much the wine tasting that we do, but we get together, and wine's a big part of it, but we don't have the formal sit down and taste blind wines. And so I had a lot of fun with them putting on tastings. Have the same wine in brown bags and different bottles, and And I had a tasting group, that was out of Portland, then we had one in Salem, a tasting group. And I got them both together and did a tasting, a blind tasting of 3 wines, a white, a rosé, and a red. And they had to tell me which one was which, but they were physically blindfolded. Physically blindfolded. So they didn't see what was in the glass. So we had somebody across the table from each taster, and so they could handle the glasses without tipping them over. But they thought that was easy task to do, no problem. The first sniff that they took, the room quieted down. That's when they knew they'd been had, because they did not. I think it was less than 50%.
Sugar and water. Sweetness and no sweetness.
So who were the original members of this Bacchus?
Bacchus Caucus.
Bacchus Caucus.
Bacchus, the god of wine.
Oh, okay.
Caucus is a meeting, a gathering. Yeah. What about them?
Who were the original members of this group?
They were people that were associated with the Port of Portland, people I worked with. They weren't in the industry, and neither was I at that time. We just moved to Portland, and there was a wine shop in Portland at downtown called Bert Harris Wine Cellars, and he did these classes on wine. He had one class called Wines of the World, and it was an introductory class. He went to that, and he very formal, sit down and taste the wines. It was very good, very educational. And so we wanted the wives to do this. And so the Bert was very chauvinistic about this. He didn't teach women how to do this. It was a man only. And we thought, wow, what are we going to do? So we decided to do our own tasting. So we got couples together, and so the wives could be part of this. And so we did our own. And that's what formed Bacchus Caucus. And if he'd have done that, if he'd have done the women's class, then maybe Bacchus Caucus wouldn't have emanated out of that. But it was a really good experience, and we learned a lot about wine, and then they all followed my endeavors in buying the land, and they all came out and were part of that development too. So our friends have all been part of it. And every 4th of July we had a picnic in the vineyard with a whole lot of people, friends of the kids, mostly parents of our kids that they hung around with. So, and that all was great to a certain point, and then the kids matured, and then they took on new friends. You know, they went to college, and all of a sudden the parents weren't the friends of our kids anymore. We were still friends. It was a different environment then. That's all I got there.
All right. Well, my last question, or technically the second to last question, where do you think the future of the Oregon wine industry is going?
Well, it seems to be developing now and becoming larger wineries. California folks are coming in and they're buying up places and putting things together to form larger. So I think there'll be larger wineries, and then there's a point where you're a small winery, and you either got to stay small or sell out.
Yeah.
There's a breaking point there, and I think there will be a lot of little wineries, and then a smaller number of big wineries that will take over. But You know, when you go from 9 wineries when we started planting grapes to 630, I think there are now, that's quite an expansion. And I don't know how much further that can go. When you think back of where the wines go from these wineries, there's not that much shelf space
Right.
in the markets. And so you have to get out and figure out a way to sell your wines different than the norm, which is go through a distributor, and that's no fun if you're a small winery. It was one of our criteria in deciding not to move forward with the winery was we didn't enjoy working with distributors.
Right.
They'll distribute your wine, but you really have to get out and do the marketing unless you're a big item in their book. And most of us aren't that big to be a force within their marketing efforts, because you got to make money for them. And if you don't have a lot of product, that's not the case. So you got to get out and sell your own wines, even though they're distributing for you. And we didn't enjoy those kind of relationships. And but there's a limited amount of marketing that you can do, and it's changed a lot. You know, we didn't have wine clubs in the past. That's a new thing. We had tasting rooms that we encouraged people to come to. That's an outlet, and that's a good outlet if you can encourage that, because you eliminate the retail and the wholesaler in that equation. So per bottle you make a lot more than you would going through the retail trade. But you're limited on what you can do there, how you can get people out to enjoy the environment and the wine area that you work in, and because that has a lot to do with it. Brooks has been successful here, and they've created something different than the norm. The effort that we did in the past, I myself, when I went out to tour wineries to try to get 5 wineries in a day, well, that's quite a few. But today, it's more of going to 1 or maybe 2 places and spending more time and enjoying that experience and having something to eat to go along with that, and a place for entertaining friends. And even at Brooks Winery, the tasting room, they offer coffee and also have a couple beers on tap for those who don't drink wine. And it's become a focal point for the neighborhood, the rural neighborhood that was not here before. And quite often, if you go there to Brooks, you'll see the farmers in the area having a beer or wine or coffee, socializing with people they've never socialized with before this winery came here. It's a rural phenomenon that didn't occur before, and we didn't encourage it at Hidden Springs. It just wasn't part of our thought process. And if you didn't drink wine, you shouldn't be there. You know, that sort of thing. That's what we were there for. But it's changed around. So we've experienced people they'll bring friends out here just for entertainment purposes, and they don't have to clean the house at home or cook dinner, but yet they can entertain their friends.
Well, those are all the formal questions that I have written down. But is there anything that perhaps I should have asked you or something that you'd like to add before we conclude our interview?
Carolyn, you got anything else that?
The community thing where,
I did that.
yeah. Are they still on the speaker?
Yeah, but you can do magic with that.
Yeah, we can cut out the pause. I would be curious if he has advice for people today.
Yeah.
Comment on that.
A what?
What kind of advice would you give people wanting to enter the wine industry today?
Wow. With or without a big bag of money?
Let's go with not that much money. Stick to the dreamers.
Well, it's very expensive now to buy an acre of land. Very expensive. And especially if you bought one with grapes already on it, it would be a long time before you'd be able to return any money on that. My advice is to scout around and try to find that elusive piece of property that's still out there, that may be wooded or logs on it, or treed or something. Finding the right site for an inexpensive amount of money, but you might have to put the work in it yourself to clear it and to make sure that it's logged off or what's there is taken out. That would be the inexpensive process to do it. There are a few orchards still around that are fruiting, filbert orchards, or some cherries still left that have fruit on them would be good sites. But I'm sure that those have been approached already. So it's not very encouraging for somebody starting out with not much in the way of funds. Or to find somebody that's already has the land and maybe is struggling, and maybe try to form a partnership and put some labor into it. That might work too. Like Al did with me in the winery back in the old days, starting Hidden Springs. He had a portion of the equation, I had the other portion, and we were able to put that together. But that's a tough one. Now, if you got a big bag of money, it's easier. But you can get some loans these days. Or chat with your parents about the concept. It's a lot more sellable now that people see that it's already an established industry. I mean, even the banks will talk to you now, whereas before they would not. And it wasn't till, I tried in Salem to get a loan for the winery, and there was nobody would talk. Nobody wanted to deal with this unknown until we had a manager come into a Salem bank from California. And he came in, and so I went to him and told him what we were interested in. And oh, yeah, they do that all the time down in Napa. And he was able to get us a loan. But he had had the experience in California.
Yeah.
Something else that I wanted to talk about was a little project that I had going within the industry, and that's to create a series of wine roads in connection with the Scenic Byway program. And the concept was a designated wine route from I-5 on 99W that would go all the way down 99W through Dundee and McMinnville and on down through Amity and eventually Corvallis and Eugene. And then there would be another one from well, Grants Pass, and Roseburg was the other one. So Roseburg, Grants Pass, through Applegate, and that's Medford, Grants Pass area. So it'd be three main areas, arterials, that would go through the state off of I-5. That would be called wine routes or wine roads. And then off of that, you would have signage for different wine regions. We almost had that.
Yeah.
And it was a precarious position that we were in because the Department of Transportation dealing with alcohol, they're very cautious about that.
Right.
But the traffic engineer, who was the main guy behind this, I had talked to him for many years about this, and no, we can't do that. No. But he took a vacation and went down to Napa, and he saw what was going on down there. And he come back and he called me, initiated it. I've been rethinking this after this experience, and so he proposed it, and we had it going. But there was he was scared to do it because he's afraid somebody's going to blow the whistle and, hey, we can't do that. Alcohol driving, this doesn't make sense. And so we got in a position in the industry. Some people, well, what about me? What about my route, my winery up here? The route doesn't cover me. And that's all it took. A little dissension amongst us, and it failed. And I think that's still a possibility. And I've been talking with a few people, and I'm going to see if I can't get that going again. Try it. My last ditch effort.
Well, I look forward and, hopefully hearing about, this project being passed and implemented.
Well, I hope I can get somebody in the industry that would take it on and carry it. So far, I haven't found that person. Not, it's outside of each one's wheelhouse.
Right.
And it's hard to get people to think outside of that. And I talked with Tom up at OWA, and he's got so much to do, he doesn't have time to market this sort of concept. So it's going to take somebody within the industry to do that. Be a good dissertation project for some student.
I'm going to have to pass on that one. But I do wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you.
And with that, I guess we'll end the interview.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.